morning. My name is Lynn Connor. I'm pleased to be here with Barbara. Barbara and I are a product of your care and concern and help and support because we attended here many years ago, and you've been with us in this journey for many years. And so, we come here grateful for what we've been able to experience because we've known you. And so we say thanks to all that you've done for us. The Battle of Somme in the Second World War was a long, drawn-out affair. The Allies, Britain and France against Germany, trying to break through the lines. Long drawn-out battle from July until September of 1916 along both sides of the Somme River. In France, just ground on month after month after month with nobody really making any progress one way or the other until September 15th, 1916, when the British introduced something new, a tank. Nobody had ever seen a tank before. They got 49 tanks going against, and they're impervious to machine guns and barbed wire and trenches. Nothing can stop these things. So they got 49 that they're throwing against the line. And finally, on September 15th in France, they broke through the line. And then there's an eyewitness account of what that was like. And this eyewitness account says, panic spread like an electric current passing from man to man along the trench as the churning tracks reared overhead. Men threw up their hands in terrified surrender, or they bolted down the communication trenches towards the second line. They forgot everything they'd learned, and they just left. Well, you know what the odd thing about this is? The tanks were really ineffective. Most of them never made it there. They broke down or they got stuck in the mud, and they really weren't that important. They just were so frightening. So this experience of fear is really obvious in the military. That's where it's most obvious. In law enforcement, in firefighting, there's so many places where this is really very obvious that fear would become a part of their experience and need to know how to deal with it. And yet, it's not only those jobs and that employment that brings people up against this fear, but everything, almost everything in life. With our jobs, with having to confront an unusual situation, someplace we've never been before, news about health, losing our job, having to go back to school, having to retool, accidents. There's just so many places, even in our most intimate relationships, in our closest relationships, there's this tension about, am I safe with this person? And there's fear in being open and being close and deep. And we have to go through that because it's a real part of our life in lots of ways. We lose our companion, we lose our support, loss comes against us, and we come up against fear. So we're going to look at Isaiah 41:10 today, just to obtain some counsel about how to move ahead with some sense of confidence when we come up against these experiences that we didn't plan on and what it looks like we have no control over, but we have to go ahead and we have to overcome. So Isaiah 41:10 says, "Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be afraid, do not be anxious, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." Now, I want to give you my orientation about the book of Isaiah, just in general, kind of an overview of Isaiah. And I see two perspectives in the book of Isaiah, two different halves. The first half, chapter 1 through 39, there's a perspective here, and it's what I call the Airbus 32A perspective, or 320 perspective. Now, most of us have been in an Airbus 320, right? Flying somewhere. And so from that perspective, that's pretty cool if you get a window seat, because you can look down and see a whole lot of stuff, right? It's bigger than you're down here on the earth. You can see more, and it's really pretty up there. And when you look down, you can see the roads and the cars moving and the rivers, and you get a really big idea, a bigger idea about what's going on. So that's that perspective. In these chapters, the first 39 chapters of Isaiah is kind of like that perspective. It's about Hezekiah's day. And it's about a period of 150 years where it goes through the Assyrian Empire and then the Babylonian Empire. I mean, these are huge empires, huge, carrying such incredible landmass. And Israel's just this little dot down there, Jerusalem down there, in the midst of all of this. And as it goes through this, of course, we understand that Israel suffered incredible defeat. And what's the word I'm looking for in English? This is incredible setbacks in their advance, and they had to deal with the understanding of this. But the message of this big section of Isaiah is defeat didn't mean that God was really small, puny God, and that the Assyrian gods were bigger. It didn't mean that. Defeat for them meant it was simply discipline for a defiant betrayal of God. It was discipline, and God was actually using that for a bigger plan, but it went so much more, and this was not the end for them. So then we come to the second part of Isaiah, the second half, chapter 40 through 66. And this is an even bigger view. It's huge and immense, and it's what I called the space station perspective. So if you probably won't be, but if you ever get to the space station somehow, the perspective there is just so much bigger. It's global. It's cosmic. It's just so much wider. And that's what this second part of Isaiah is about. It's not only a couple of empires. We're going through hundreds of years. The Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, from that point all the way to the Messiah and beyond. This is what Isaiah is talking about in the second half. And the message here is Jehovah, the supreme God, who is supreme over creation and time and everything, has this incredible message that God's amazing grace will triumph in redemption and release and restoration and return. So it's in that section, that second section of this huge, expansive, amazing, wide view of what God is doing. He's trying to, there's a very personal message for the people of God, so that they will understand at that point, so they would understand, and kind of so that we could understand too, that we fit in this whole picture of God's purpose throughout history. Every one of our lives fits into that plan. So Isaiah 41:10. Do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Surely I will help you. Surely I will uphold you. First, it tells us what not to do. Right? Do not fear. Well, you know, I don't know if you found this out, but if I'm talking to people, I know it doesn't really do any good to tell people who are frightened and anxious and kind of tense about what's going to happen. It doesn't really help to say, don't be afraid. You shouldn't be feeling that. Don't do that. But God isn't that callous that he would say that to us, but he's bringing attention here to something that happens in us that he wants to deal with and he wants to help us with. What we don't need to do is be carried away by fear coming into our life. Fear is that spontaneous, physical, emotional, mental capacity that I believe is God-given. All these capacities God has given us to be able to understand what our situation is and respond to it. We have this emotional, mental, physical capacity to respond to our situation. And this is what fear is. As we confront whatever indicates danger or risk or vulnerability or potential loss of well-being, we are afraid. And there's some real common reactions to fear. I've lived every single one of them, and I'm guessing at some point you may have too. One of them, the first common, is to fight. And when you fight in the midst of this, it's just like rising up to aggressively confront it, to confront the threat in order to get rid of it, in order to minimize it. And so what you sense in this and what you live in this and express in that is more irritation and anger than anything else, and you can get pretty harsh about dealing with people and even yourselves in the situation. You come up fighting. That's a very common response. There's another one people point to, and that's freezing. Just completely incapacitated and stuck by the threat and its immensity, confused about what to do, where to go. You know, I don't know how to respond to this. I've never been here before. This is too big. It's too immense. So freezing up is pretty common. Another action that's really comes up very quickly for us is to just flee. Just get out. Get away from it. Not even go there. Run away from it. Completely get away to avoid the danger that's coming our way and go someplace else. Not even confront it. Just bolt away from it and try and hide. Those are really common things that we deal with. Well, they aren't really that helpful. So God tells us to do some other stuff that's really much more helpful. I think it's important to notice that he says, do not fear, do not be anxious. But we don't need to see it as a callous command to not feel that. God doesn't approach our situation and what we live through by saying to us, don't be silly. Oh, that's stupid. You shouldn't be feeling that. Or why do you think that? He doesn't approach it with that kind of minimizing. What he's doing here is naming it. He knows his people. He understands what's in their heart. And he calls it out. He calls it fear. He calls it anxiety. He's not mincing words about this. He knows when we feel this and live this stuff. So he calls it what it is. And there's no criticism, there's no rejecting, there's no embarrassment, there's no mocking on his part. He just knows it's there, so he addresses it openly. And he validates this experience in the processes of thought and emotion that he's given us and calls us to concentrate our efforts someplace else. So what is CS? You know, if we can't do that stuff, and we've lived this. It's not very effective to flee or to fight or to freeze up on these moments when we confront something that's frightening or anxiety producing for us. So what do we do? Isaiah tells us here, gives us some really clear ideas about how we can handle this differently. And the first thing he says is, do not fear, for I am with you. So the first thing here is to acknowledge. We have to know and acknowledge that God is with us. His presence with us. This is a consistent promise from God from the very beginning, when God chose to be with his creation, with man and his creation. And then he came to the tabernacle, and then Emmanuel came, God with us, and then he promised, I'll be with you to the end of the age, over and over and over. The agreement that God has made with us by his grace is that he will be with us. He's there, but you know what? In these moments, I don't know what it's like for you, but when fear and anxiety is starting to grow and get a grip on what I'm thinking and how I'm acting, it does not feel like God is very close. That's the moment when, for many of us, it feels like he's the farthest away. And I can't sense him anywhere. And it's so alone and difficult to be facing that and sense kind of abandonment when you have to go into this with such anxiety. That's why it's so crucial to acknowledge that God is here. He promised it over and over again. Now, you know this, I think, from your own experiences, that when you're going through a difficult time and you're concerned and things are intimidating and you have to face something that's really big and it seems pretty heavy and terrible that you have to go through this stuff. If you can have somebody there to accompany you, that makes a big difference. But even more than that, what if that person who is accompanying you really knows what they're doing? And they really have skills and knowledge and ability that goes far beyond your capacity at that time. That's even better. That's who God is. He comes with us, but he's got so many more resources. So acknowledge God's presence. The second thing, he says, don't be dismayed. For I am your God. I am your God. Now, we've got to recognize who this is, right? We've got to pull back and look at this truth and go back and understand this person who's accompanying us, not just some Tom, Dick, and Harry from down the street who happened to come in while we weren't looking. This is the sovereign Lord over all of history, all of time, all of creation, who does the impossible, who has no limits, who goes beyond the laws of nature, you saw those big kingdoms there and how immense they were, who sees those huge kingdoms over all that expanse as a drop in the bucket. That's what he says. What does he say earlier in Isaiah 41, verse 4? Who has performed and accomplished all this, calling forth generations from the beginning? I, the Lord, am the first, and with the last, I am He. This is who is present with us. This God who moves entire nations and all of history, and he's saying that this God who does all of that comes to us with a personal message and saying, you fit in my plan and I'm here and I'm working for you and with you and beyond you in order to handle this situation. So, we got big theology here. Acknowledge that he is present. Recognize who he is. This person that's accompanying you, isn't just somebody from down the street. He really has resources here. So in some practical term, what does this mean? This big theology. What does it really mean for our daily experience and the experience we have to deal with when we are afraid? I don't have any trouble admitting I've been afraid. I got lots of times when I've been anxious. So, what do we do with this? What does it mean for us that God is with us and he's this great person? Well, he says it here. What this means in practical terms is, I will strengthen you. Now, strength here is to pull together the required energy that we need to focus our effort on what we have to deal with. And it's all inclusive. It can be physical energy, mental energy, emotional energy, the force we have to exert to overcome, to deal with this, to not run away, to not fold, to not freeze, to not have to become really harsh and aggressive, to stay away from all of that and deal with this in a responsible and healthy way. God can provide all of that. It's all inclusive. Anybody, you've gone to Mexico, right? In an all-inclusive hotel? Well, it's all included. You can have pop anytime. Our kids were really excited about this because they could go any time of the day and get the pop they wanted. They thought they needed pop, like at 11 a.m. You can do that. So let's say at 1:30 you're still hungry and you need a hamburger. You just go up and ask the guy and say, I need a hamburger. It's all included, everything you can possibly imagine. So, this is a different situation, but it's kind of like that. This all inclusive, God, anytime we need, whatever it is, physical, emotional, mental, whatever force and energy we need, we can go and ask, and there he is. It means he will strengthen us. Now, David had quite an experience with this. Way back, even before he was king, he was kind of running from Saul, and he went to help the Philistines. Of all things, he went to help the Philistines. He thought he could get away and help the Philistines. And while he was away, he and his soldiers, while he was away from their settlement, the Amalekites came and took away all their families and hauled them off towards the east and devastated their settlement. So these guys come back, the Philistines wouldn't accept them, so they came back, and they look at their settlement, and it's all gone. There's nobody there. It's burning. And so it says in Samuel chapter 30 that David and the people who were with him, that's these really strong men who were soldiers, they came back and they wept until there was no strength left in them over what had happened. Really? Wouldn't that devastate you? The fear that would overtake you to see this situation? They wept until there was no strength in them. In fact, those guys were talking about stoning David for being so irresponsible to go over to the Philistines. So David confronting this, what does it say he did in verse 6 of chapter 30? He strengthened himself in the Lord. How did he do that? He took it all to God. He went to God and asked him, what am I supposed to do about this? How do I handle this? Shall I go up against them? And the message was, yeah. But see how he turned towards God. when he had no strength, he turned to strengthen himself in God. That's what we're supposed to do. Take it all there. We say, God, I'm really afraid of this. I'm scared about what's going to happen. This is too much for me. This is beyond my capacity. I'm frightened. I'm anxious about this. This is what I'm living now. It doesn't seem like you're really close or really helping at this point, so I'm just letting you know I'm coming to you because I haven't got it. So he strengthens us. Later it says, surely, moreover, kind of in addition to that, not only will he strengthen us, but he will help us. The thought here is supplying everything necessary to someone. He will supply everything that's necessary to come up against this and to push through and to even be victorious and not allow this fear to dictate how we're going to behave or how we're going to treat other people or how we're going to come out in the end of this. He will supply what we don't have, whether it's in wisdom, knowledge, tools. He's got much greater resources than us. And the sense of God being our helper is really, really big. There's two ideas when we think about help. I got somebody who's going to help me. There's one idea that's like me when I was working on the farm as a teenager. I didn't know anything. I wasn't the farmer. All I did was, lift the hay bales and put them on the rack there. I was a help, but not much, I couldn't do much. I was just there as someone who much less skilled, who had no knowledge, who just did what I was told, but I did help, right? It was kind of a help. But there's another sense of help that's so much bigger than that, and that's like this help. It's like a neurosurgeon, because this guy or gal can help. She really can help because her skill and her knowledge and her experience is so far beyond mine. I can't do it. I need someone who can help precisely because they have all these resources. That's the sense in which we look to God. He says he can help because all these resources that he is and he has given us go far beyond our own, so he can help. We turn to him. He says, I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you. So what do we need in times of fear? Support. Someone to support us. And the literal meaning of this is precisely what you think of. Attaching yourself to somebody by grabbing onto them and holding them up. To grab them, to assure that the outcome, and to assure that this experience and this moment, this devastating moment that's so intimidating and so big in our eyes will not destroy us and will not ruin our faith, will not ruin our life or ruin our walk with God. He will reach down, and the worst moments, he'll grab onto us to prevent the effects that are so possible. I've lived those effects, the flight, the fleeing, the freezing, the fighting, all of these things coming up against fear. I've lived some of those effects. And the interesting thing about this message about Isaiah for this people in this time is that in English, it takes into consideration those moments that are so fearful in our life because we failed. And we created them through our own rebellion and our own disregard for God and his word. Even those moments, as he talked to this people, even those moments, God includes as we come to him in this message of upholding us so that we do not fall. So Pastor Josh has talked about this in the last couple of weeks, about being upheld like dads when you grab onto the bicycle, right? So that even if it's a little tipsy, even if he does fall, it's not the end, right? You can get up. There's someone there who's supporting, that's beside you. It's this incredibly immense, sovereign Lord who's upholding you with his righteous right hand. Now, not to minimize any left-handed people here. That's okay. It's just that the general sense back then was, for a lot of people, probably even a higher percentage of people, the right hand was the one that was really effective. You could really use it, unless you're ambidextrous, right? This is the one you can't, if you write with your left hand, who's going to read it? You know? You can't even hammer with your left hand, you know? I mean, for us right-handed. For you guys who are left-handed, you can do all of that really well. But with the other hand, that's really ineffective. You know, you can't do anything with it. So that's why he brings this thing to his right hand. This, not only is God like this, who's so immense and has so many resources for us in this moment, but he's most effective, and he's putting his most effective stuff on the line for us. And it's a righteous right hand, because his righteousness means he rightly responds to the covenant he made with us. He rightly responds to the agreement he formed when we came to him, when he brought us to him. And he follows through on that. In every instance, it says he is righteous because he doesn't back off. And he doesn't fail to show up. Even though we can't see him, he's there, but he's never fails to be there. So, this is what God tells us about fear and about how we confront it. To be open and to speak openly among ourselves and with the people who are closest to us about fear in order to bring it down. If we start speaking, if we'll say something about it truthfully, it brings it down. We need to realize that, to help regulate it. And then we stay away from this ridiculous stuff about criticizing ourselves and thinking we're weak and stupid and dumb for being afraid, when actually we're confronting a situation that is fearful. And so stay away from that, because God does. He doesn't make fun of us, and we ought not to minimize the fact that we experience anxiety. So then we direct ourselves to the truth that God has given us. I am with you. I am your God. And then we ask for these resources. Strengthen me. Help me. Support me. I need you so much. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you as people who are needy. And we ask you to come alongside of us. I guess you already promised that you will, so it's not like we're asking something that's strange to you or isn't already happening. But we need to voice this to you. Sometimes we're afraid. So strengthen us, help us, support us for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.